precision, watch investors collide.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fundraising, where we interview top early stage investors and ask them all the questions that you need to know as a first time fundraising founder on the fundraising process. Many of the questions here today were actually posted and upvoted by founders in this exact position. And today I have an amazing investor for you. I'm going to prop him up a little bit, and maybe it's because it's Colorado. I love propping up all of our Colorado investors here right down the road from me. Jason, founding partner and GP at Convoy today, that's going to go through the fireside Q&A. Jason, how you feeling today about the questions?
I'm feeling good. I feel like I should have probably prepared more for this test than I did. But Matt, thanks for having me on. And yeah, I appreciate you putting this together.
I thought about even starting to send the questions ahead of time like I did, but then also like throw them out the window and then do a whole new set of questions just to keep VCs on their toes.
Honestly, we ask everyone else questions. It's fair. You flip the script a little bit and ask us some questions. I think it's fair.
Yeah. Right. We'll throw in maybe a few curveballs today, but not many. There's not many curveballs, I think, to be had. Because again, many of the questions that we're going to ask today were voted on and asked by founders. These are the questions that they wanted to know about the fundraising process. So we're going to give them what they want, give them all the answers to that. But let's start first with a quick introduction of Convoy. Can you tell us what you're investing in, average check size, and stage that you're looking for?
Yeah. So just, really quick personal history, kind of what led to this firm and what we created. Personally, grew up outside of the U.S. Parents actually worked for the U.S. government, moved every 2 years as a result all over the world, came back to the States for college, did a few different things. But most recently before this, I was actually an engineer at IBM in their artificial intelligence division. So I got to do a lot of really fun stuff with ML, NLP for government clients, for enterprise. And so that was kind of my DNA before this. And so I actually was banging on a keyboard, 12 to 18 hours a day before this. That's what I did. Launched Convoy in 2018. We had a thesis, myself, Josh, and then Jackson, who are the three partners that started this firm, that we thought that there was an interesting technology set that could be repurposed that was being built around the gaming ecosystem for the enterprise and for other critical areas of critical industries. And so we started with this thesis of how do we get into gaming tech? Gaming has been a industry that's accelerated really well over the last couple of decades. We thought, hey, wherever people spend time, innovation typically chases thereafter. And so that's where we decided to focus as a firm. That has expanded as a firm over the last 5 years. And so we essentially look at deep technology across a lot of different ecosystems. We still have a core thesis around gaming. We think there's a lot there that's really interesting. And we typically like to write checks between 3 to 5 million. So that's us. We invest globally. Most of that activity is here in the United States. And so I would just describe it as deep tech around critical industries. And if you have something in gaming, we do care about it for a lot of reasons, and not just because I'm an avid gamer myself.
I love it. What's interesting is I have some of the folks from Speedrun on in the next couple of weeks in future episodes. They had a similar kind of thesis and landed in a very similar spot where they realized that gaming from a broad sense applied into so many different areas, and realized that, wow, a lot of the companies that we kind of thought were gaming are actually kind of critical deep tech companies that are almost using gaming as a way, and gaming not in the sense of video games necessarily, but just in the broader sense of how they were thinking about some of these areas. So it's kind of interesting that two incredible funds like yours and in Speedrun kind of came to the same conclusion in a way.
Yeah, I think on this, it really comes down to, I'll speak for myself. Like, I never worked in the games industry before this. I purely went into this because I said, hey, wherever people spend their time, and increasingly gaming grabbed more and more of that time, that's got to be where technology is pushed to the limits, and also where innovation chases. And so to me, I looked at that. I also saw a lot of great colleagues of mine that would actually go work in the games industry, and said, this is a magnet for good talent. And so I think very highly of the Speedrun folks. We've done a ton of deals together. And I think we kind of, the melding of the minds here is, at the end of the day, there is just a point of where people spend their time. That's where the best technology is created. And, as technology investors largely, and that's what we focus on, we got to pay attention to this industry. Otherwise, we're not doing it just, we're not, I think, taking care of what we should as investors, and we should pursue it.
I love it.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit on what you were doing before Convoy. Is there any more history that you want to add to the kind of the founding story of maybe why you chose in Colorado, why you kind of chose this thesis
Yeah.
and decided to start Convoy.
Yeah, so I think for I'll start with, why Colorado? Pretty simple. My wife is from a small town in Colorado, and I love my wife, and I wanted her to be happy, and she wanted to be here. And
It's a very
so that
Colorado answer, by the
yes,
way.
that
It's
is
just like,
that
yep.
is that is the truth of it. I could come up with some other fake answer, but that's the real answer, and that's important to me. I've moved all over the world pretty much my whole life. This is the longest I've lived anywhere by a factor of 2x. Actually, now I've lived here for 8 years, and so this is home. So we have planted the flag here in Colorado. So that's why the location. The second thing I think I'd say about why Colorado is before I moved here, actually, I was unaware of a couple of, hubs that were very interesting. One is the quantum hub here. There's also a deep focus around critical minerals that's really interesting here. There's the space and aerospace kind of environment as well. And then obviously, naturally, defense with a lot of the activity we've got going on in the Springs. And so for me, I like a lot of those different areas. I've worked in a lot of those different areas that interest me. And so this is kind of a natural location to be. I always joke with my friends in, El Segundo, it's like a lot of the same industries are here, except we don't have to pay California taxes. So, why in the heck would I be based there? And also the weather is better here. I know they're going to say it's better there, but I think it's better here. We make winter fun. So I'm going to go with that. And then around the genesis for Convoy, I mean, the honest truth of it is that I was writing a newsletter with my partners for fun when we were all in New York City, and we started kicking around this idea around, hey, if we were going to approach an investment firm, like how would we approach it? And we all kind of melded around. We thought there was something interesting going on in gaming tech. And we started writing about it. And the truth of it is we had a lot of people subscribe to that probably should never have subscribed to my thoughts, but they did nonetheless. And those were our first LPs. So those people asked us, and I still remember one of them wrote, like, have you ever thought about launching a fund? And I just responded, no, that's not of interest to me. And one of my other partners was a little more wise and was like, hey, like let's talk about that, right? And intellectually knew what a fund was, but to me, I didn't, wasn't interested. I was an engineer, right? That's what I did. And I learned pretty quickly that I view investing like research, just with dollars. That's how I view investing. It's such a fun industry to be in because you get to research stuff. And then when you have strong convictions, you don't just write a white paper and then shelve it on the shelf. You actually get to go find a company, deploy dollars against it, and back a really great team. And so
Yeah.
that's why I got hooked into it.
Yeah. I love that. I think some
Yeah.
of the best investors never really sought to be an investor in a way, or at least that wasn't what their original career path was. Although in some cases, when you look at performance, it kind of says the opposite. It's a whole tangent there, but maybe you can,
Yeah.
you'll prove that the exception there, that I think operators end up making, I think, some of the best investors in the long run. But let's go into some of the questions that were nominated or voted on from founders here. The first one, it was the number one question, was what is your favorite part about being a VC? And then what is your least favorite part about being a VC?
I mean, I think the favorite part of that is what I just said is I get paid to research, right? And so that is where I feel at home. That's what I love to do. I love to get deep understanding about different topics. And so when I really think about my seat, that is one of my favorite things that I get to do on a day-to-day basis. The second part that's my favorite is I get to talk to people that are astronomically more informed and more intelligent than I am on a wide variety of topics, right? And every single day, it's a very humbling experience. You get to show up to a computer and you talk to people all around the world, and you walk away being like, man, I understood about 10% of what that guy said, but that was a fascinating conversation and I have to go learn more. And I love doing that, right? I love that so it scratches the itch for knowledge. The hardest part about this job, I think, is context switching. And I think I think that is one of the most difficult things you got to manage, where in one sense you're going from, I'm evaluating a company in aerospace. I'm evaluating a company in, battery technology. I'm evaluating something in ad tech. Those are all completely different ecosystems. It takes a lot of time to switch. And I think that is one of the things that is hardest about this job and always makes me do less than I wish I could do. Right. And that's the truth of it, right? And so I often fall behind on great deals, great operators pitching us, and I wish that wasn't the case.
Yeah, the common phrase that we say on this pod is we get to go a mile wide and an inch deep, and how sometimes that is a blessing and a curse for sure, because you never get to go as deep as you'd like to in some cases. So that's
Absolutely.
absolutely true. Another question, what are some of the industries or problems that you're specifically excited about right now? It could be you specifically, it could be from the fund's perspective. But are there any particular problems maybe that you're looking at right now and are excited about over the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, I have been very, and this isn't net new for a lot of the market, but I have loved all the work that is happening in ASVs. This is
Okay.
and USVs. I think this is something that fascinates me, stuff I got to work on in my career before this as well. And so for me, I look at both maritime, air, land. I think there's a lot there that's very interesting. I've also seen a lot of the simulation technology that honestly, there's a lot of DNA in the games industry that we've drawn from, and some investments we've made into that industry. And the pairing of those two things is really fascinating. So what does next generational simulation software look like with next generational USVs and ASVs? That is a thing that fascinates me for a lot of reasons, both in logistics, combat, and yeah, I've spent a lot of time there. We've made a lot of investments around that ecosystem.
And it's still growing. There's so many companies we see air, even underground now.
Yep.
There's every level.
Tunneling away.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And it's very timely, obviously, because we're seeing even with the conflict currently as we're recording this, conflict in Iran and just overseas, it's going to continue
Yep.
to be something that is needing of investment. Last question here, kind of in the introduction piece, one that you can get to be a little bit braggadocious about. Why should founders pick you and or Convoy to be on their cap table? What makes you unique to these founders?
Yeah, I think it's a thing that I always tell people when we're getting pitched to say you should always make the VC pitch you back. And I think there's a lot of really smart people in the market that you can take money from, right? And so if you're looking for just intelligent, smart, that there's a long Rolodex that Matt can show you, that I can show you of people that kind of fit that bill. If it comes to me, I typically say this: look, we are a venture fund that likes to back up the hilt and back to the hilt a company. And, we do not do a ton of investments every year. We do 6 to 8. So we're very concentrated when we make an investment. I will lead the next 5 rounds into a company. We've done that before. I take that approach. And so if that type of, I'd say like buy-in is interesting to you, I think that's a good match. The second thing I think I'd say is, look, I do not like to invest in things I don't understand. And there's a lot of different investment perspectives on this. I take the approach of I like to, hopefully go a couple inches more deep than 1 inch, right? I like to be very narrowly focused on you and obsessed with you for quite a while before I make an investment. I don't like to make investment decisions overnight. I have, and those are usually not worked out well for me. And so that's my perspective. So if you want somebody who is very focused and hopefully knowledgeable about your business, my objective is always to be the most knowledgeable investor in your cap table in whatever you're doing. That's my objective.
And I
Yeah.
think that goes back. That's where you get with an operator turn investor is you do get to have kind of that friend that you can almost rely on in a way, or colleague, more so than just capital investment. So that's great.
The other thing I tell you, I say, Matt, and like I think that this applies to Harpoon as well, but there is a difference with smaller firms versus bigger firms where my net worth is tied up in this business.
So true.
This is my company, and every time we write a check out the door, the success or lack of success affects me and my family. This is where my net worth is. I think it should be that way. So I always say there's a lot of alignment. When we write a check into a company, I say, look, I'm betting on you to make me successful too, right? I don't have the luxury of hitting the eject button and just quitting next year. Like that's not what we do. And so there is sometimes alignment, I think, on like the ownership level between smaller firms versus bigger firms.
Yeah, it's exactly what one of our friends and colleagues here in Colorado, Adam Burrow, said, where if every investment that they make is tied so strongly to their own outcomes, where if you're a large fund and you're just writing checks all over the place, it's not that those checks don't have matter or care, but it's certainly not going to carry as much weight for that fund, and then therefore the investors writing them.
Completely. I think that we say this all the time. We don't do placeholder checks. Like we don't believe in them. And I think for me, we make a decision. We're either in your corner to the fullest extent we can be, or we're not, right? And so if we're in your corner, it matters, and that's what we try to exemplify and try to like live
Mm,
as a firm.
love it. All right, let's go into the exact fundraising process. As a reminder for anybody that hasn't listened to these episodes before, we split it up into 3 different waves. The first is, how can these founders typically listening that don't have a Rolodex, they've never even fundraised before, how can they go from, I have an idea, maybe I have a pitch deck, how do I get it in front of somebody like Convoy to get into phase 2, which is the actual first meeting, initial meeting, how do you knock it out of the park to then continue that fundraising process, which is step 3, going from a lot of initial meetings to pushing it over the finish line and closing the round. We'll break up the fundraising process into those 3 sections with questions in each. starting with getting in the room. Typically, when we talk to founders, a lot of them, they're building this initial Rolodex, a list of funds that they want to include in their fundraising process, almost like a mini CRM. What advice would you give to some of those founders on maybe what characteristics or things they should index on when building up that list of investors for them to reach out to?
Yeah. And I would say look, fundraising is a beast. It is a lot of work. I fundraise myself. So I have a lot of empathy on the other side of this table. I always joke with our founders and say, I asked for bigger checks with a less clear product. And so it can get worse than you pitching a defined product. I have a lot of empathy on this side of the table for fundraising and the amount of no's you get. When I think about building your pipeline, the way I would do it just off the bat, if I had a pre-seed or seed stage company that I was building for, I would say, look, what are the most tangential companies that I think are in market that are not competitive with me? Who has backed those companies? I would build a list of the top, let's call it 50 investors that play in the space. I would then programmatically scrape all their emails. Do not just do a programmatic outreach that I can tell you when I receive it. I know it. Everyone knows it. Research a little bit about me and try to make it a little personal and do a quick 2 to 3 sentence email. Catch my inbox, right? Something I love that always catches my inbox is, a defining sentence in the intro email of like, Jason, do you want to change the way X is happening? Like that has worked on me. I will click and open that email. What doesn't work for me is intro call requested, where it looks
Yeah.
like some super suit buttoned up like iBanker sent this to me. Like, do not do that. You're supposed to be radical. You're supposed to be kind of a mover and shaker. Like, shake me with your email. Get aggressive with the title, right? Like that's what I would do, and that's the tactical way I'd build that first list that I'd go out for.
From like a fund size or anything there, are there any feedback you give to founders? Should they have a mix of all of them? Should they focus on smaller funds or just larger funds? And then what does that kind of look like from your perspective?
I mean, for me, I think it more is topic related. Where if you see, it's not hard if you go look to my LinkedIn or Matt's LinkedIn, be like, what's Matt thinking about? What's Jason thinking about right now? That is who you should target. So I think one of the few things that people do really, really wrong is they look at big firms and they're like, well, I reached out to Andreessen, but they didn't respond. And I'm like, well, maybe you reached out to the wrong person at Andreessen. Do a little of your
Hmm.
homework. Just do a little DD. It's not that hard. So that's the first thing I'd say at big firms. At small firms, I would say look for the partners that are focused on the things that you're interested in, right? And if there's not a one for one, then sure, take a shot and who the heck knows? Like maybe someone will come off the bench. So I would say get a mix of both. Go for it. This is a numbers game. Like I hate to say it, but it is. Like if you're not reaching out to at least 50 funds for your pre-seed, you're doing it wrong.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed. So let's say that they have the list of found or funds they want to reach out to, the investors of maybe some of those funds. You mentioned maybe some of the emails. Are there other ways like LinkedIn, Pigeon? What are some of the other ways that you've seen founders actually reach out successly to some of these
Pigeon,
funds?
pigeon for
Pigeon.
sure. Yes, pigeons
Yeah.
for sure.
No.
I would say definitely do not. One thing I know this is probably me stealing a later question but I do have people that send me physical mail of their pitches. I will say that does not work with me. I would encourage you not to do that. It does not come off the right way, especially when it is
Yeah.
received at your house. So I would
Yeah.
encourage you guys, please do not do that. The office is one thing. So if you have a hardware product, especially like a consumer hardware product, like that is an interesting kind of angle of like send something to the office and give some instruction video or something like that. That's interesting. I would say LinkedIn is the most successful. I would say that is the core platform I
That's
would
kind of a hot
reach out.
take. That's a hot
I would
take.
I would say LinkedIn is the most successful. It is amazing. You have a platform where you can reach anyone in the world. There are so many guards on my email to prevent issues from coming in. There's a good chance you get caught in that, right? So I would say LinkedIn over email personally. Obviously, if you can get someone's phone number, that is the most accessible and best way to reach people. But I think usually if they're like me, they try to guard that. Unless Matt tweets it out later. Please don't do that, Matt. But,
I won't do it. I won't do it. Yeah, the personal stuff. Sometimes founders get overly creative on going to your
yeah.
house or those types of things, and it kind of goes over the line a little bit.
Yeah, no one wants to be walking with their kids and then getting pitched a company, which has happened to me a few times, and that's not of interest.
I'm not as famous as you. I don't have the facial recognition piece yet of people like stalking me and asking me, but I could see how that could definitely be an issue for sure. So the other question that we have here so you mentioned the LinkedIn being a good model, the email. what should be included? Do you like pitch decks? Is it pitch deck? Is it memo? Is there a combination of all of them? Are there mistakes that you see? Maybe one that I can toss out there is the like reply back if you want to see a pitch deck or some of those things. What is the format in which some of these folks are like trying to give you the information that you need that you most prefer to receive?
I mean, if I was designing my perfect cold outreach, it would be a good title catch, something like Jason, or, I'm trying to do this, like changing aviation, changing mining, something just catch my eye. In there, I would then say, Jason, I'm reaching out to you because of this, to being like showing some sort of intent and thought of why you came out to me. Second point, I would be like, this is what we're doing. This is the problem. This is the solution. And I would hyperlink, here is the deck. If you want to click on it, here it is. I would send it to the doc send. I would not do attachments. Again, a lot of like just structurally, a lot of investors have protections around their email. I do. And a lot of those attachments will never make it to me anyways, but a link always will, right? A link will. And so I would encourage you to do that. And also if it's doc send, it's like very approachable. So that's how I would structure the email. I think it's very tactical. And I think I'll speak for myself and my team. There's a pretty good hit rate that we're going to open that email and look at it and potentially click on your deck. And then you're going to get our email then again. Oh, I know Jason looked at me. This is
Yep.
great.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I look through spam and I see a bunch of spam because of having big attachments. Like it's a 30 megabyte pitch deck. Even Google, I think, will just send that to spam. So they don't want to do that from an unknown email. So that's good advice. Even just using a link or some of these other ones, and plus it's better for founders anyway because you get to
Yep.
track and see clicks and opens. So yeah, don't send a massive PDF to people. That's not the way to do it.
Yeah, it's 2026, guys. There's other ways to do this. Pigeon's better. Pigeon's better.
Pigeon is better for
Yeah.
sure with a
Yeah.
physical copy
Yeah.
of your deck.
Yeah.
Speaking of pitch deck, what are the slides or slide that you particularly look through? A lot of VCs I talk to, they tend to, in some cases, go directly to this slide and they want to look at that first before even going through the rest of them. Do you have that kind of slide, or is there a different approach that you take?
Yeah. I think you're coming into this. I was like, what do I honestly do? Right. I'm not going to give you my what do I honestly do is you send me the deck. I look quickly to be like, what the heck are you doing? What's the problem? I then go to the solution slide. And then if you're pitching me something beyond or seed plus, I then try to go find the traction slide, right? If it's pre-seed, I obviously don't look for that. I'm like, you got no traction. Let's just call it what it is. And then I look at the team and I'm like, okay, what's the problem? How are you guys solving it? What have you done? And then are you qualified to do it? That's how I quickly go through the deck. I look for those like 4 slides. I probably don't even read the rest, to be honest
Hmm.
with you.
Hmm.
Right. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm interested in this. I think these people are qualified. Let's do a call. And then I will spend time looking through the materials. But I find that the rest of the stuff doesn't usually actually inform my decision, which is gate, call, or email to follow up with questions, or no call, no email.
What on those slides particularly do you want to see? What can make like a really good team slide, for example? What do you need to see on those to better capture your attention?
Yeah, I mean, for like the problem, the shorter the better. If you can just distill it, I mean, that's the art of. I think you're obsessed with this one thing. I'm not like you should assume the VC is not thinking about you at all and your problem before they open this deck. Can I get it really quickly? Can I get it in 5 to 10 seconds? And if I can't, it's probably you messed up on your side, because you got to think, Matt, myself, and all the other investors, and we're processing thousands and thousands of deals a year. Right. And so like, how do you quickly communicate what you're trying to do very simply, almost to a layman? Right. And that's really hard with deep tech. Like, I get it. Like, if you're talking about like a high performance computing company, if you're talking about like a chip company, it's really difficult. I get it. But I'd say like, I'd spend a ton of your time on that one sentence. This is the problem. This is how we're solving it. Like that wakes me up at least.
Are there any slides that you think founders maybe spend too much time on? You mentioned like maybe some of the highly technical ones are going really deep. Could be one of those. Are there any other slides that you think maybe you see too many of and you're like, I just wish founders maybe not take them out, but spend less time on them?
Yeah, honestly, like pictures of the product, like unless it's like a hardware thing, like if it's a software, I'm kind of like, I'm looking at a dashboard. This means nothing to me. Like, let's just skip all this stuff. Like, I always love it when I get like a slide deck that's like 10 walk through like a persona use case. And I'm like, no one's gleaning from this what you're hoping for. And so I'd say like remove that. And then industry research, I feel like isn't usually great on a slide. Um, I always tell people more graphs, less text. Like, I understand a graph in 5 seconds. I understand text at a lot slower pace.
Honestly, that's similar feedback I gave to a lot of people on websites was when they like try to put really small screenshots of dashboards that end up being too fuzzy.
Yeah.
The other thing
Yes.
too is that unfortunately most designs are not very good. Like most product design is not very good. So the fact that you want to put it like plastered in your pitch deck is also not as attractive as you think. So it can kind of hurt you both ways.
Yeah. That
Yeah. All right, let's say that they've done all these things right, though. And maybe actually, before we even go to the next phase, are there any other mistakes that founders make consistently in this kind of pre-meeting phase? Whether it's in their pitch deck, the setting of the pitch deck, you mentioned a few already. Any other mistakes that you see founders make that you want to touch on before we get into the initial meeting phase?
not off the top of my head. I think those are the mistakes I typically notice.
So now we're into the meeting. You've scheduled it, they've scheduled it, it's on the books. Leading up to that meeting, is there anything that you think founders should be doing? So it's almost pre-call. What should founders be doing going into a call? They know they already have it. What's some advice you give founders for the information leading up?
Someone just did this for me, which I loved. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish everyone did what you did. And I gave them this feedback. And, was this call got scheduled. They said, okay, 2 days before the call, they sent me a pre-scheduled email that said, here's the full deck, right? Here's 5 points I would want you to walk away with. And here are the two top reasons why people are typically passing on us. This is what you should be aware of, right? Like, I thought that was really interesting. It was kind of like front running the bad news, right? And he front ran some of the news that I didn't like. And I was like, but he softened the blow. So I loved that move. I would highly recommend a pre-email being like, hey, just getting ready for a call tomorrow. It shows intent, shows excitement. Also, it helps kind of get your brain working, being like, oh, right, I am talking about, high performance computing on Tuesday, right? Like, let me get ready for that call, right?
Yeah,
I don't know. I find that helpful.
I like that. That's a really good one. Are there any things that you, from a VC side, want to see in this initial meeting? Is it more on the product? Is it more on the founder? What do you need to walk away from in that initial meeting that gets you excited to continue the process?
To be honest with you, at that stage, if I think there's a problem and there's a good solution, then it comes quickly to be just all about the person, right? In our business, we're hunting for exceptional people who are hell bent on building in whatever industry they're in. And that has to come through in the first call, where it is so painfully obvious to me that this person has to do this thing, because building a company is really hard, right? And so to me, my encouragement to founders is always demonstrate the excitement. Don't err on professionalism, err on excitement, err on just communicate the enthusiasm and why you are doing what you're doing. Like, if I'm ever asking, that kind of makes sense. Like, that's a good idea, but I don't know if Matt's really gonna, like, he could do like 9 other things, right? If that's the takeaway, I'm probably not going to back you, even if it's a great idea, because when the going gets tough, like, you're going to leave. Right. So that's what I spent a lot of time thinking through. And we spent a lot of time with like founder frameworks and personas
So it's
and
almost like a
trying to
founder market fit in a way there.
yes. And it doesn't have to be just experience too. Like, that's the thing. Like, we've had some amazing founders build amazing things, and honestly, areas they're probably not qualified to do it. But they were so passionate about it, and that was so clear to us. You know, I will take passion over, like, professional accreditation any day.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And I think that a lot of times founders maybe forget that and then they talk too much about the professional accolades and why they're there, which could be important, especially if it's highly technical. But if you do not include the reasons why, then a lot of that can be lost for sure.
Yep. Yep.
Are there any questions that you think founders should ask of VCs? You mentioned this earlier, you kind of encourage that in a way. What are some of the questions that founders should ask in that initial meeting? Not because you want them to, like, you look at it as a check mark or like, oh, I'm glad they asked that. But again, more as the founder taking ownership and control of the fundraising process. What should they be asking those VCs?
I mean, I think you should ask questions like, what about what we presented to you made you want to take this call, right? Like, try to understand what is bringing me to the room, right? And I think not as a challenge, maybe I would say to founders is like, assume just for a second that maybe some investors are also, everyone's there to obviously, hopefully do a very good job for their fund, which is to have an exceptional outcome financially. But also on the other side of the table, there's things that get me going, get my gears moving that might be slightly different than Matt, right? And so, like, Matt might be in the room for a different reason than me, right? And I think understanding why I'm in that room, what is motivating, what is getting me so intellectually curious, I think is pivotal and paramount, right? And it's kind of like know your customer. It's like know what brought me to the room. Or like I'm passionate about this thing versus, also probably tell you if I don't have a good answer to that, you'll be like, yeah, it's probably low odds that Jason's gonna issue me a term sheet. It's like qualifying, like who's
Should
real,
they
who
ask that
isn't.
question at the beginning then of the meeting, almost to steer the conversation?
I would. I've had 2 or 3 guys do that recently to me, and they're like, "Okay, like, understood. That's really great to know. Like, this is what's bringing you here." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what's interesting to me." And you can tailor your pitch accordingly.
And probably a red flag if the VCs are kind of stumped and are like,
I actually don't know
I
why I'm
don't
on
know
this
why I'm
call.
talking to you.
I mean, and I think like we've all done that. We've all gotten in the room and like I think had that, and we were like, "Actually, I'm probably not a great fit for you. I'm sorry I wasted your time." Right? Like,
Yeah, good point.
and if you're being honest, I've said that once or twice not too long ago where I'm like, I'm not the right guy for you. I'm sorry. Let me think of some people. Let me try to make it up for you with some people I think that might be the right people for you.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the green flags, the traits that you're looking for with some of the founders. You mentioned maybe being in a call and having to kind of pull the parachute early. I've done that a lot of times. Sometimes it is related to the founder, and sometimes it's because of the like red flags that you might see them kind of presenting. Are there any sort of red flags? Is it just that is it the opposite of what you mentioned earlier and that lack of energy, lack of excitement around the problem? But are there other red flags that a founder should be sure to not show during the meeting?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things I'll tell you straight away that I look for is if, especially if it's a first call and there's two or more people on this call, right? And if there is founder tension on the call of any kind, we're out like immediately. So I will tell you, we've pulled a parachute on so many of those where if I start to see, if I'm on a call with Matt and we're co-founders together and Matt says something, I'm like, well, actually, like what Matt said isn't really right.
Boy.
It's like naturally you're like, starting a company is so hard. If your own troops aren't unified together, it's over. Right. And
Mhm.
so I think that's something I look for. So I'd say like be sure that you present a united front. And hopefully you actually do have one, or you probably shouldn't be founders together. Other things I would say, like, generally speaking for me when I'm looking at teams is I like it when people can answer my question quickly and then be like, I can dive into that further if you want, but that's the answer. Just like
Mm.
call it out. And it's like, instead of burying it at the end, really talented communicators do that really well. And I wish I'm still trying to do that myself, but that's an art that I think founders would do really well in pitch sessions.
I like that. You mentioned multiple founders earlier. Do you prefer to have all the founders on the call? Does it not really matter if it's just like the CEO? Where does that lie with you?
A psychology on this is look, if round is moving really fast, sometimes I'm like, hey, please get your whole team on there. I want to meet them. If it's not, let's say it's called a normal process where you don't have like, a gun to your head and you're like, we can actually run a normal process. I would kind of say don't bring all your founders on the first call. It should just be one on one because you're still qualifying me too. And what if you just wasted 3 people's time to qualify that I'm a terrible fit for you? That's not a good use of time. So I kind of view that as a slight yellow flag where I'm like, when I show up to the call, there's 4 founders there. I'm like, guys, this is an intro call.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do this. So that's a negative signal to me.
I like that. I agree. Sometimes it does feel weird when there's like the whole team on that side, especially if no one else is talking. Sometimes that can also be a little bit not a yellow flag, but it's just weird when you just have a bunch of people staring. It's like, shouldn't you guys be doing something else? Maybe. So I agree. Yeah, sometimes that can be a negative for the intro call for sure. Are there any other mistakes or pitfalls during the initial meeting process that founders should be weary of or avoid? A lot of times it's 30 minutes. It's a very important 30 minutes. Sometimes it's less, usually not more. What other mistakes have you seen founders make during that initial call process?
Really small thing. This might be a pet peeve thing, and I try to do this myself on calls. And this is, we have every AI note taking capability possible now. Do not have your hands on the keyboard for any reason. Just keep them away because naturally, what, I think the other side assumes is like I'm emailing, I'm slacking someone, I'm letting someone know. And it's like, I'm trying really hard myself to stay away from all that when I'm talking to founders, just to be like, hey, I'm here. Like, I'm here. You've got my full attention. I've got no other tabs open. I'm just looking at you. Right. And I would encourage founders to always do the same. And it never feels good when you're like, sort of feel like they're emailing and, it could be really important, but like, I just wouldn't do it. Not a good signal.
Yeah, it does send a negative signal because it is important for if it's And I talk to VCs about this and let them know that they should not be doing that, because a lot of times these founders have this sense of, this is the most important meeting of my life. And then all of a sudden a VC is like texting or on their computer, and
Yes.
it's such a bad view.
And we've all done it, like, and so there's grace in this process. Like,
Yeah.
I hope, I have had grace extended to me in this process. But I would say it's the same way as you feel when you're out getting beers with your friends and they're on their phone the whole time. It's like, why are we here?
Yeah.
Why are we here?
Agreed. All right. Let's say that they've crushed the initial meeting. They're now
Yep.
going into kind of the meat of the fundraising process. This is typically the part that's the hardest. You can schedule a lot of initial meetings, get a lot of perspective, but until the round is closed, you're going to have days where you think like, we're good. And then other days where you're like, we're never going to close this thing. So it can be really, really difficult. What advice would you give founders just as a whole as they pursue the closing of the fundraising process itself? What should they be prepared for? What can they do to make it easier? Anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, the truth is that I think there's a couple things you're solving for here. One is making sure you show your best face to a person that's leaned in, being like, I actually want to pursue forward. I'm not just like, send me a follow-up email, like, and we'll figure it out. You got to figure out like, hey, I'm responding to pull here, but you're also trying to manufacture momentum, right? Especially if you don't have a lead yet. And maybe a question I would ask founders to ask, I asked this question. I'm like, and I use this as a fundraising tool for myself, or sorry, a closing tool for myself with prospective companies. They say, you need a lead. There's a lot of followers out there. You need a lead. Ask people, one, do they lead? And then ask them,
Mm.
of the last 10 deals they've done, how many of those were lead checks, right? And if someone says, yeah, I lead, and then 9 of the 10 were lead checks, man, that's a great candidate for you to sort of form around. If the answer is, well, it was 2024 the last time we led around. It's like, well, that's not a good fit, guys. Like, that's probably not a good fit. So that's a qualifying, I think, thing I would do in this process. I love it when I ask the question, hey, especially if it's a seed round, do you have a data room of some kind that you put together? And they say, absolutely. Here's our financial projections. Here's more on our product. Here's some research that I would encourage you to read. A question I always ask is I say, if you could design the perfect investor, what articles or things would you have had them read ahead of our next call to know what you're doing better? I ask that question all the time. I love when founders light up and they say, oh my goodness, I've got 3 things I would love for you to read. And I come from, a more research technical background. I love to read. A lot of investors actually love to read. So I would say to have that stuff ready. Just be ready.
Yeah, be prepared. And you kind of the reason this process is so hard is that every fund has their own unique diligence process. Could you talk a little bit about maybe specifically what that diligence process looks like at Convoy, from that initial meeting to we're going to continue going? What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, for us, we take the approach of everyone on the investment team is kind of like a portfolio manager. It is your job to get your deal, and your entire team up to speed on an opportunity. Actually, at the finish, before we make an investment, we have the full investment team join every single kind of final stage deal. And we do a very long call with the team. And typically the deal lead's relatively quiet in that call. And so we like it because we want you to get touch point with everyone on our investment team. We want everyone to be informed. And so we take approach of tons of volume. And then when it comes down to, Matt, if you and I are a team together, Matt, you're like, man, I'm banging the table on this deal. I'm like, that is going to demand my time as your teammate. And I'm going to spend all afternoon on Monday getting up to speed on your deal, right? Like that's how we sort of think about it. And, I always say I feel very informed on the deals we do when we do them. A couple years in on a few, I feel like I can't give you more than the cocktail answer on what an actual company I'm not point on is doing in some spaces. But at least at the time I knew what they were doing, right? And I always want to be held accountable to that. I want to know how our companies are doing and who they are when we make the entry.
How many meetings typically do you see from the initial meeting being one? How many additional meetings on top of that should the founders kind of expect for you guys?
It really depends on the deal. I mean, I have done probably, the smallest is probably 4 or 5, but sometimes we compress it where it's, we've done 12 meetings in a week where I'm just like, this is it. We're doing everything here together and we're just gonna, you're spending the next 3 days with me and that's what we're doing. So it's a pretty wide range. I don't have an equation for you of like 6 meetings with Convoy equals check. I don't have that one yet. But I would say probably, I think most VCs in our space are you're probably looking at least 4 to 6 meetings before you get something serious.
And sometimes those meetings, to your point, are like, can we just hop on really quickly to talk about like this particular thing? It's not like you're going to hop on for an hour long Zoom and go through the same stuff.
Yeah, no, like I think for us, when we do like a third call with someone, we are very leaned in, right? That's a okay, I'm spending a ton of time now on this outside of our calls, and I'm usually texting people being like, what the heck is this term? I really can't understand this. Can you just help me out? Right? Like I do that a lot of that and just try to make it more collaborative. And sometimes I just share with them like, this is what I'm writing about you guys. Do you disagree with any of this? And they're like, let me redline it. And that's a healthy thing for me to do too.
How often do you guys do customer interviews, background checks, check stuff like that? What does that process look like? Yeah.
If you have existing customers, we're talking to them. We always do background checks on people. It's amazing what you discover on some people, both hilarious and also not hilarious. So I think, for every fund out there, like you have to do this. And I think this is just a part of the business we're in. I also love just talking to, we do a ton of like backdoor referrals on people too, where we don't ask for you to refer us to someone. We try to find, it's pretty easy to find people that know you in this day and age.
It is.
And your reputation carries far and wide.
Could you shed some light on VCs are also talking to each other during this process? Is that something commonly like that founders should be aware of as they kind of get into this, where we know who else is circling? You're probably talking to them. Is that right?
Yeah, you better believe, if like Matt sends me a deal and then, I'm talking to the deal, I'm talking to Matt about the deal, right? Like that's the way it works. And, it's just like any industry, you have friends and you have people that you like to work with. And I think another thing, a good signal to remember is, on our side, we do a lot of repeat business with our, the funds that we like to work with the best. Right. And so there's a lot of mutual assured to kind of like act well together. At least that's what I hope for. And hopefully we deliver on our side too. And so I think it's a good thing to ask too, is like, hey, if like, Harpoon introduced me to a deal, I'll be like, Jason, have you worked with Matt before? Or like, how do you know Matt? Ask those questions. It's good. It's good to know and kind of know the connectivity and how well you know each other.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see founders make during this phase of the process where maybe they're trying to build a little FOMO, they're certainly trying to herd cats as far as the investors on their cap table go. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see founders make here?
Don't make stuff up. Uh, don't make up the
It's a big one.
timelines that aren't real.
How often is that? How often do you see that?
Often.
Often. Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, really often, unfortunately. It's just it's a like, I get it, like, you have this issue. You're like, "How do I create a timeline? I have a company I gotta run. I gotta create a timeline. I gotta close this out. I gotta go back to the business." But if you say something like, "I've got, term sheets," and you actually don't, that's a problem, right? Because that's not truth, right? That's not the true.
And like we just said, we'll find out because we're already talking to the other funds.
Most of this is illuminated, like it happens, right? And so I would say it's painful, but like, I would say always just say what is true, never make stuff up. You can use the lines that work for me as, I was just like, when do you need to close this round by? And they're like, this is our runway, this is our date. A lot of the pressure will be taken off if you raise your round appropriately to your runway, by the way. You should never be raising with like 3 months of runway left. Like, I always tell people if you got sub 12 months, you should be out there in the market, right? Like,
Yeah. Always be
otherwise,
raising.
you should always be raising. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah. Unfortunately, your job as a CEO is like hiring and fundraising. And that's kind of it. Which is not usually what we sign up for when we start companies, but unfortunately it ends up being the reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is when you kind of think about or actually, let me take a step back. A nice problem to have that founders will more often than not, I think, run into is they might be a little bit oversubscribed. And I say a little bit because it's more rare. You see on the news all the
Yeah.
time, they're vastly oversubscribed, and the founders like, there's no room in this round, da 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 da. That's that's more rare. What I find to be quite common though is that the founder has like one or two investors that they kind of have to turn away because they're just a little bit oversubscribed. They have to kind of make one last choice, maybe two, on who they can either keep or even turn away. So it's a good problem to have, but I think it's more common than founders might think. What is some advice that you would give some founders that are in this situation where they kind of have to start picking and choosing what funds they want on their cap table? And this is usually deep enough in the process where they know the funds pretty well, they know the investors pretty well. what's some advice that maybe you'd give founders in that picking selection?
Man, that's tough. I would tell you, generally speaking, I say, look, it's better to have one really happy party on your cap table than to have two not pretty unhappy parties on your cap table. And I say that to my own potential future detriment, where, if you're looking at the two funds and you're like, man, they could each get 1 million, but they'd both be kind of pissed about it. Or I could just give Harpoon 2 million, give Harpoon 2 million. Like, that's what I would do. And just be like, these people are going to help me the most. And then, to be honest, you communicate that to the one that you're rewarding the bigger, being like, I'm having to make a really hard call here, guys. I'm doing this in faith. Please, honor that decision. Right. And I think that's like a little bit of a bond too with, who you do end up selecting. So that's what I would do if I was in your shoes, is make one person really happy.
I like that. It kind of similar. What if there's, like you mentioned, small funds advantages there, and large funds maybe having some advantages there. A lot of
Yeah.
times you see founders that are like, they have a big VC fund that's like, we want to take, to your point of like a 2 million for one, or maybe they take 1 million and then they spread the other three or four with smaller VCs. What advice would you give a founder that's coming to you and being like, hey, this big VC wants to take the whole thing? Any advice that you would give that founder there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple thoughts here, right? One is, look, you got to know everyone's got their bias. I've got my bias. Matt's got his bias. We kind of live in the same, I think, capital stack of the ecosystem. We're not writing $500 million checks. Like, that's not what we do. So I think the thing I would say to you is this: you want to matter to your cap table. And so if I manage $25 billion and I give you a $2.5 million check, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't move the needle. You could 100x that investment and it still doesn't fully move the machine forward, right? Being a little bit dramatic here, but it doesn't matter at its core. If I lose $2.5 million at the firm, or Matt loses $2.5 million, that matters to us. Like, we feel that hit. And I think that there's a good thing of aligned incentives there. I would say the risk you run with smaller funds there is, obviously, they're probably not the people that are going to lead your Series B, right? Like, I'm not going to write you a $50 million check. That's not what I'm going to do. That's where you have to bank on them being a feeder into those groups, right? And so I typically advise people just take money from people that you're going to matter to them the whole way up. And there's usually good alignment then on your board, your biggest shareholders. I would counsel that.
Maybe one of the questions that you can ask of the Convoys of the world, or Harpoons that aren't these tier one multi-billion-dollar funds, is asking them what relationships they already have with those funds that can maybe help them in a Series B or beyond. Because you're exactly right. You're going to need those relationships too eventually.
And this is like, our job is hopefully to build up those relationships and have good ones, right? And like, you have, constant relationships. We talked about the speedrun guys. We've done so much stuff with them. We've had a great relationship with them, right? And I think knowing where you are in the capital stack is important, right? You can't be everything to everyone.
I like it. All right. Let's say they've closed the round. Everybody's celebrating. You get a little bit of, champagne problems for like 5 minutes. And then you go back to work and you kind of restart the process again every 6 to 12 months. But what is some of the mistakes that you see founders make immediately after the fundraise? They have capital maybe for the first time ever. What are some of the big mistakes that they should watch out for?
Overhiring and engineering in
Mm,
particular. I think that's a huge thing that people do, is
too many
they get,
people or paying people too much, or both?
well, I think actually both. So, I mean, I tell this to all my CEOs is, look, there's excellent data on what you should pay people. Uh, Pave is a great resource for this. If you don't pay for it, I think it's sub $5,000 a year. You will make that in, your offers
One
within about,
hire, maybe.
yeah, one
Yeah.
one hire, $5,000, right? Not Pave does not sponsor me or this podcast, but I would say use it, right? Maybe Pave does sponsor. Maybe we'll get them as a sponsor for you, Matt.
We'll have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just teeing you up. I would tell you that is an excellent resource. Like, go use it. Be like, hey, look, I want to pay my individuals within the 60th percentile, 75th percentile, and in this market, know what you should pay them. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, on engineering, typically that's not revenue. It's not tied to revenue as much, right? And so I would say go hire excellent people, pay them slightly more, hire less of them. just go pick up 2 or 3 engineers when you think you might need 4. I just see time and time again, people just, they overhire in engineering, revenue doesn't catch up. Then they're stuck with this like bloated engineering team. And it's like, obviously it's different if you've got like customer demand, you've landed this like huge contract and you're backfilling. That's a different thing. But if the revenue generation isn't there, don't overhire on product and engineering.
What's the advice you would give founders on what expectations they should have of the VCs on their cap table right after they close and like in that first round?
Look, I think people say all kinds of stuff to win deals, right? Like, and that's the truth of it. I think what I try to do, and this is something I've tried to evolve as someone who's been professionally investing now, I think 7 or 8 years. What do I actually do versus what I wish I could do, right? What do I wish I could do? I wish I could hire for you perfectly. I wish I could tell you exactly what your product roadmap is. I wish I could tell you and do deep technical overviews with you on every single thing you do. Realistically, I can't do that, right? And so what do I think VCs should do for you? They should help you with your corporate governance. They should help you with your financial planning, and they should always be helping you with capital raising. That's
That's great.
that's what we're good at. If you're looking to me to source your CTO, I think we're in trouble, right? And I'm a technical person, and I'll do interviews with you, but I'm not going to be your lead gen engine for that. Like, I'm an investor. I'm not the right person to source the CTO for a pick your.
And that's where, I mean, some VCs specialize in some of those very specific value add things. But unless they have that specific thing, and then maybe you can rely on them for that, I agree. Sometimes there's too much pressure put on VCs after the fact to be quote unquote helpful when sometimes that's just not the name of the game. And you wouldn't want them to be, maybe.
And I think it's just that's expectation management. I think part of that sits very much in the fault on this side of the horse, right? Where the other side of the house, the horse. That's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
a phrase. Side of the house. It sits on the side of the
We're
house where people.
gonna make it a phrase. I'm gonna put it on a
Yeah,
t-shirt
so
now. On this side of the horse.
this side of the horse, we have problems. We got Colorado. We got horses around here.
We do.
And I think like that is a problem with us, right? And we say stuff that we can't back up. And I think I have been trying as with my team to be like, let's be very, very thoughtful about what we say we're going to do and try to follow through with it. If we can't follow through with it, let's just err on the side of let's not say something to win a deal and not follow through with our word. I think that's kind of
The last question here, although slightly doom and gloom a little bit, but most startups fail. 99%
yes.
of even the founders that are raising capital and successfully will not make it. You've probably seen a lot of those. I know I've seen a lot of those. What are some of the main reasons that you've seen the companies, whether it's ones you've invested in or just nearby? What is the biggest reason why you've seen them fail so that some of the founders can start to early prepare for that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the questions I did get a little bit of a jump on ahead of. This is the one I think I spent the most time thinking about, honestly, is what's the pattern recognition of failure? And I think one is shiny object syndrome, where something comes in that's new and flashy. You haven't quite found your success with, idea A. You get drawn into idea B, and I think there's a natural inclination. There's this like point in the building the company where you haven't really gotten like true validation feedback yet back from your customer set. And you're like, do people even want this thing? Is this real? Is this real? And I find that most notable in the pre-seed to like seed stage. And so I'd say have conviction around what you're supposed to be doing and stick it out. And if you think this is still the right thing, don't get distracted from some like random idea. I'm not saying you should ever not change your product or pivot, but I think people pivot way too quickly. That's the thing I think I see. The other thing I think I see is like people raise money and they get out there and spend it like it's infinite. I mean, in this era, like, especially with how fast contracts can move, especially if you're on consumer side. I mean, there's a case you should only raise one equity round ever. Like, I think we're
At
entering
least
a
you should
world where,
think that way. You
yeah,
should plan on that.
I think we got to get to a spot where it's like maybe 1 to 2 rounds. And then your plan should be, I have the option to raise money, but I don't have to raise money. And we have not lived in that world for a long time. And I think people are getting more and more there, especially in the B2B world, which is exciting to see where they're like, no, we're going to be good. Like, I got 2 or 3 contracts. We're going to be fine. We can make a decision at that point. Do we want growth capital or not? Versus like, I am, all the Silicon Valley episodes are like haunting me in the back of my head of like, I've got coconut water in my waiting room with my assistant bringing in we just hit $1 million in ARR. It's like, this is terrible. This is a terrible decision. So I think that's those are the 2 things I'd say is like, watch your budgets, don't get distracted, have conviction around your idea and see it through.
Love it. Jason, that was a jam-packed hour. We went through a lot. I really, really appreciate you hopping on here. Any last pieces of advice that you would give founders in the fundraising or pre-fundraising process before we cap off?
A couple thoughts. One, if you're married, make sure your spouse is fully aligned with what you're about to pursue. I think that's
Wow, yeah,
one.
so true.
Do not underestimate how powerful that partnership can be in your lows and your highs. That's like one thought for you. When I launched this firm, I paid myself nothing for a very long time, and I had a wife who was incredibly supportive. So Convoy would not exist without her. So that's my shout out to my wife. The second thing I would say to you is, look, starting a company is incredibly lonely. Even if you got startup, other co-founders, find a couple of people that can resonate with you. It's a journey. Do not underestimate that. You're not a machine. You're a human being. So I would say more on the relational side, focus on your in-house, and then also focus on making sure you got some support systems.
Excellent advice. Both those are excellent. All right, Jason, let us know, where can people follow you, Convoy, and keep the journey going?
Man, I got, what is it? On every major social media platform, I am findable. You can find me. LinkedIn is a great place to track what I'm doing. That's probably where I'm most active. And we do publish a weekly newsletter that's always signaling what we're thinking about. So go like and, you can't like my newsletter, but you can subscribe to it. So go subscribe. And yeah, thank you for having me on, Matt. This is great. I love the initiative. This is awesome. And if you're in Colorado, Matt and I will
Yes.
take you to lunch. Come on, let us
Yes.
know. Let us know.
Let us know. I love that. Yeah,
Yes,
we need to start doing more here in Colorado for sure.
absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely.
All right, Jason, appreciate it. We'll chat here again soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Pitch pass, iterated fast. Story beats data when the storyline's vast. Vision's the ignition, but the numbers steer the ride. Conviction and precision, watch investors collide.